بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على محمد وآله الطاهرين. Voice is okay?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yeah. This is the fourth lecture, Islamic ethics and moral philosophy, and we are talking about the ethical theories in this part, and the second part will be about the meta-ethical issues, inshallah. We have three ethical theories, three ethical prominent theories. Yes, there are some theories which are not so much interested or so accepted, so not accepted, but there are three influential theories in this side. We can say that there are three approaches to make an ethical theory. By ethical theory, I mean giving an answer to the question of the criteria of or moral standard. I mean that we have a question about the source criteria or a standard of distinguishing good and bad, or virtue and vice, or obligatory actions or non-obligatory. The question is, what is the source? What is the standard? Ethical theories try to give answer to these questions. So they are differ in accord to the answer give to this question. So we talked about virtue ethics maybe last 2 weeks. It remains just some points against virtue ethics in this lecture. I will talk about them and then go to the second ethical theory, consequentialism. And the third is deontology, Kantian deontology or religious deontology, divine command ethics. So we will talk about consequentialism tonight, and I hope to finish it because we have not much time to discuss all theories in details, because we need time to talk about the key concepts or key issues of Islamic ethics also. So the third will be about Kantian ethics, deontology, and also divine command ethics. What is the difference between virtue ethics and consequentialism or deontology? The first, I mean virtue ethics, concentrates on virtue and takes it to be a canonical concept in morality. You know, there is a controversy about the cornerstone of morality. According to virtue ethics, virtue is the cornerstone and is the key or canonical concept. By canonical concept, I mean that virtue is the end. Virtue is the source of distinguishing good action and bad action. Virtue is a standard. So this is the emphasis which we see in virtue ethics. The first concentrates on virtue and takes it to be a canonical concept in morality. But both consequentialism and deontological theories, both of them, consider action to be the central concept of morality. Action is a result of virtue. Virtue is a motivation for action. So virtue is in the soul, as a quality of the soul, but action can be seen in the reality in external world. So consequentialism and deontological ethics, both take action to be the central concept. And if they pay some attention to the virtue, take it as a derivative concept, not as original concept in morality. For them, for the consequentialism and deontology, as I will explain, for them, the cornerstone of the morality must be action, not virtue. Virtue is not so important. Action is important. It is not irrespective of the motivation of the action. Action must be the source, or must be the cornerstone of our moral assessments. So this is the three approach or three ethical theories. Last week we talked about virtue ethics. I summarize it because I need this summarize because I want to give some objection to or explain some objections against virtue ethics, and then this night, inshallah, go to the second theory. So last two lectures were about virtue ethics. That can be summarized. This is the summary of the points that I said last week's. Human well-being, or eudaimonia, as I told, is the source of moral value. The moral worth of everything is due to the role it has in human flourishing. So this is the happiness or eudaimonia. This is the main concept of virtue ethics. But eudaimonia can be known via ergon or telos of human beings, ergon arguments. These all are were explained, and so I just read it. Eudaimonia will be virtuous activities of the human faculties in the whole life. And the next point we have three faculties for action: deliberation, lust, and anger. Deliberation is related to reason, but lust and anger related to will. There is a distinction between reason and will, cognitive side of human soul and cognitive side. But because deliberation is near to action, lust and anger has no reason by itself, by themselves. Lust just working of emotion or working of appetite, and also anger. But sometimes in human being, reason can lead lust and anger. So this is the function of deliberation. So we have two reasons: practical reason and theoretical reason. Theoretical reason is not related to action; it is only for cognition. But practical reason also is knowing, but knowing how to do something. There is a difference between knowing that and knowing how to do something. Deliberation is knowing how to do something. So we have three faculties for action related to action: deliberation, or phronesis according to Aristotelian terminology, lust, and anger. The moderate work of these faculties are called cardinal virtues. The moderate work of deliberation called practical wisdom, al-hikmatul amaliyah, practical wisdom. This practical wisdom is different from practical wisdom in contrast to theoretical wisdom, because there is a confusion in Islamic literature, maybe in also it is not in Christian or in Latin, because the word is different, but we have two things with the same name. We say something that this person is has a practical reason. By this we mean deliberation, prudence by this, or phronesis according to Aristotle. But sometimes we say that ethics or politics is related to practical sciences or practical philosophy. Practical philosophy as a branch of knowledge is different from practical wisdom as a virtue. So the name is the same: practical wisdom and practical wisdom. But practical wisdom or practical al-hikmatul amaliyah, al-hikmah al-amaliyah, hikmah means wisdom, al-amaliyah practical, has two different meanings. So we must be careful that in each case we just understand the exact meaning. So here, practical wisdom, temperance, and bravery. Moderate work of all together is called justice and will be the fourth cardinal virtue. These all we talked last week's. Action has a derivative, not intrinsic value, and can be determined by reference to its root in the soul. I mean virtue or vices, because action is originated or come from vices or virtues. So action comes from vices, will be bad action. Action comes from virtues, virtue motivation, so will be good action. So this is the summarize or some points to conclude the virtue ethics. I think that yes, there are many controversies about virtue ethics, but we have no time to go in detail, in depth, to concentrate on all controversies. Just this, we can say that these points are the main points explaining virtue ethics. So we have an idea of virtue ethics. Virtue ethics as a teleological ethics, because take telos, or human function or human organ, as the starting point for knowing ethical issues, understanding ethical judgments, ethical principles. So we call this teleological ethics, and these are the main points related to this approach, virtue ethics. But there are some critical or criticism of virtue ethics, or some arguments against virtue ethics. I just refer to these points without so going to answers, explaining the answers of these objections, because as I said, we just want to have a general idea of virtue ethics and its deficiencies or merits, not explaining the depths, and so it needs maybe more than 10 lecture only for virtue ethics. So some criticism against of virtue ethics, or some arguments against virtue ethics. One of the objection to virtue ethics is this. As you remember, we say that virtue is the moderate working of faculty of lust, for example, or faculty of anger, or faculty of deliberation. Is the mean is the definition, as the definition of virtue cannot be determined exactly, because it is not the mean, enumerative mean, for example, to say that there is only one mean between 2 and 4 and it is 3. No, because the mean here is different from person to person. The mean as the definition of virtue cannot be determined exactly and differ in accord to the agent. It depends on some agent, and it also depends to surrounding conditions, time and space. For example, in Africa, maybe some amount of working or using lust is good, but in other countries or other places it is not good. So it is different in accordance with surrounding conditions, time and space, and also agent. So we have a some exactness of ethics in virtue ethics, but in Kantian ethics, no, because according to Kantian ethics we have only moral absolute duties for all people or human being in every year, in every place. But in Aristotle, because Aristotle, take an analogy between ethics and medicine, like a medicine also has this has inexactness, because in the case of medicine also we use some general common principles as a knowledge of medicine, but if we want to apply medicine to people and give treatment, so treatment is different. So here also in ethics, if we want to prescribe a person to do this for this action or that action, we have difficulty in knowing the mean exactly. So Aristotle himself was aware of this problem. But he says that this is the nature of morality, because the nature of morality is different from the nature of mathematics. In mathematics, we have exactness, but in ethics, we have no exactness. As I told, it is like medicine. So this is the point Aristotle himself accepted in Nicomachean ethics. But some people take it as objection to virtue ethics, and so some ambiguity in applying or knowing exactly what is the amount of working faculty. For example, how much faculty of laws must work to be named as virtue. This is the problem of inexactness. The second criticism or second argument against virtue ethics is this. There is a circularity because virtue is acquired by habitation, as you remember. We told that we said that virtues of character need habitation, need time to experience it. So virtue is acquired by habitation. By habitation, I mean the repetition of doing a good action. Habitation means this. But on the other side, according to virtue ethics, a good action is that flows from a virtue. This is the meaning of good action according to virtue ethics, because they say that action has not intrinsic value. It depends on its roots. So if it comes from virtue, so will be good. But virtue need to be, elaborated, to be evolved by doing good. So there is a circularity. The objection. But Aristotle himself answer, and many other virtue ethics answer that they say that there is no circularity because by imitation of the virtuous person, by referring to some other virtuous person, suppose that we have wise person and we know he is virtuous, so we learn from him to do this and that. So by imitating this person, we improve or we grow the virtue in our souls, and then the action come from this virtue. So there is no circularity because the persons are different. This is the answer of Aristotle and many other virtue ethics. But I think it is not good because many other scholars didn't accept this answer because the problem is this: how without any knowledge of virtue or good action, because at first I have not already a good knowledge of good action or virtue. How I can be sure that person is wise person, and how can I imitate this, not that? This is the problem because we suppose that we have no idea of good action before growing the virtues in myself, in my heart. We assume that I have no virtue and I have no vice, for example. I just try to find virtue in my heart. This is the assumption. So by this assumption, how I be sure that this person is wise and this person is a virtuous and another is not. So this is the problem of circularity, and I think the answer Aristotle gave is not so sufficient. So the third is the charge of egoism against virtue ethics. I remember one of the students when I was talking about virtue ethics, he also referred to this deficiency in virtue ethics. The effect of our activities on the welfare of the others are neglected because according to Aristotelian virtue ethics, we have, for example, 4 cardinal virtues: justice and temperance and bravery and practical wisdom. But all of them, even justice, because justice here is not justice as a distributive justice. I explained this is only a harmony of good working of the faculties, not justice in the to the effect that giving other person what they deserve. So even justice in this even I suppose that justice means giving other persons what they deserve, but there is no place for isar or charity or other love other person like yourself. This is the charge against virtue ethics of Aristotle, classical virtue ethics. But this is not work again not working against religious virtue ethics, because as you remember, we said that Aquinas, for example, added charity. Charity means a sort of altruism. So this charge or this objection is not against religious virtue ethics of Farabi or of Ghazali or of, but it is against pagan virtue ethics. So the fourth and the important point is that according to virtue ethics, always the goodness of action or the badness of action is related to its motivation, is root in the heart. But we see, or we intuitively know, that there are some things, wrongness of them, wrongness of some actions, such as stealing the property of a person or killing the innocent. They are dependent on the motivation, because always they are wrong. So they are wrong independent of their motivational source. So this is the accusation or charge usually deontological moral philosophers proposed against virtue ethics. So I finished the discussion of virtue ethics here. Also I know that there are many problems, there are many questions, and so there are points needed to be discussed more, but because of the time, we finished the virtue ethics here. So we come to the second ethical theory. So I remember that you asked me to give some reading list. Today I sent it to my brother, and also I sent the slides and PowerPoints of last lectures, and I hope that it will be useful for you, but it is not so edited. It is only for personal uses and as a handout. So one of the books I usually benefit of it in explaining ethical theory is a very good book, is Ethics, a Pluralistic Approach to Moral Theory. Here I cited and referred to it. This is a very good book. So sometimes, in some cases, I just take the phrases of the book and I refer to this book and cited some important points of this book and some other books I referred in the reading list. So utilitarianism, the second influential and very important theory, because in the West, also in the East, because sometimes we have no name, but we are doing the same. For example, in hedonistic approach, we say that the West, some people say that West or the Western philosophy accepted hedonism, and so they are following pleasure only and not paying attention to other important things. But sometimes in the East also, we have the same behavior without the name. So utilitarianism is very important and very influential school in ethics, accepted with the name or without the name by many scholars in the world. So I try to have a not detailed but accurate explanation of utilitarianism, and then say something against it and go to the third theory, deontological ethics, inshallah next week. Tonight I am talking about utilitarianism, but utilitarianism need more time, and there are many handbook or companion, for example, Cambridge Companion to Utilitarianism or Routledge Handbook of Utilitarianism, many publication about utilitarianism. So I'm not talking about the history of utilitarianism because it takes time, and so I just refer to the point content of the utilitarianism and say something against it, or about the merits or benefits or deficiencies of utilitarianism. So utilitarianism begins with one of the most important moral insights of modern time, that consequences count. So because, you know, in some approaches to ethics, for example, in deontological ethics, in some cases of deontological ethics, we only say that we have a duty to do this, and it is not important for us what we bring, but this action. Our duty to tell truth, for example, and we have no idea or no you know, attention to what we bring by telling truth, or by dying, or by killing, or by, it is important to do the duty. This is the you know, moral conception of common conception of morality in the old, because some people take that a religious view also. They say that we must only act according to the commands of God, without paying attention to what we bring by doing these commands or by actualizing these commands. So it is important only to do duty, to respect duty. So utilitarianism begins with one of the most important moral insights. This insight was not so much common in all the history of humanity. So Heinemann says that this is a very important, very you know, new insight. So this insight is that consequences count. This is an important point. But utilitarianism indeed goes one step further. This is good insight, good idea, and as I refer to or speak about Islamic view on utilitarianism, I will say that this is okay, that consequences count. But the problem is this: indeed, it goes one step further than this and claims that only consequences count. This is the problem, or this is the you know, main point of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism is not accepting or claiming that consequences count, because we also in Islamic ethics can say that consequences count. This is okay. But what we have problem with consequential utilitarianism is not this claim. This is okay. It is or further step they bend. This is this that only consequences count. This is the problem. So utilitarianism maintains that the morality of an action is determined solely through an assessment of its consequences. This is the definition or the main content or the important figure of utilitarianism. So utilitarianism, in contrast to Kantian ethics from one side and to virtue ethics from other side, it is for this reason that we call utilitarianism a consequentialist moral doctrine. We call utilitarianism a consequentialist because it takes consequences matters. Morality for the utilitarian is solely a matter of consequences or calculation of consequences. There is no other thing. There is no intention. It is not important for utilitarianism. What is your intention? It is good intention or bad intention. What is important? It is the result this action, you know, brings. This is the importance. This is the point of morality. According to utilitarianism, we know virtues. We have no virtue or vice. It is not important to have virtues or vices. It is important to do something it benefit the people, as I explained. So this is the main difference between utilitarianism and virtue ethics. According to virtue ethics, action has no intrinsic value. Action has derivative value. Action has its values from consideration of the motivation behind that action. But according to utilitarianism, motivation is not important. Is motivation of you is good or bad? It is not important. It is important to do something, make or maximize the pleasure or benefits of the people. This is important. So this is the main issue in utilitarianism. It is sharp contrast. It is in sharp contrast to Kant's moral philosophy, which, as we shall see, places exclusive emphasis on the motives behind in an action. Because we will talk about Kant ethics, and according to Kant ethics, what is important, the intention of respecting law, only doing some thing in accord with law. So we will talk about this idea, but just here to refer the contrast between Kantian ethics and utilitarian ethics. So I cited from Ethics, a pluralistic approach to moral theory, fourth edition, Lawrence Seaman and Thomson Wadsworth, and I referred and gave some other books also in reading list. So in this respect, it is also in contrast to virtue ethics, which, as we saw, places exclusive emphasis on the virtues and vices as the qualities of the soul. Virtue ethics in this regard is near Kantian ethics, because both pay attention to the maxim mental qualities, and because according to Kant, it is not only important to do something in accord with law, but most important is to do this thing only for the respect of law, not for gaining other benefits or other things, in contrast to utilitarianism. So in this respect, virtue ethics is near, or Kantian ethics is near to virtue ethics, but there are other differences. And so when I will explain Kantian ethics, I will refer to some differences. So this is the definition of utilitarianism, but there are many points must be explained to have a good grasp or good knowledge of utilitarianism. So one of the question is, utilitarianism says that we must consider consequences, but the question is, consequences for whom? Because consequences must be regarded for somebody, or some person, or some animal. For this, the question is whom these are consequences for. This is the question. This is the main question. So utilitarianism is not the only consequentialist doctrine we have seen, because many other theories we call consequentialism, because consequentialism means that consequences is the only thing matter in ethics, but it depends on consequences for whom. If for myself, so it is called egoism. So egoism is a sort of consequentialism, but it is not utilitarianism. So utilitarianism is not the only consequentialist doctrine we have seen. There are many other forms, such as egoism or tribalism. There are other sorts of consequentialism. So, for example, ethical egoism is also consequentialist, because according to ethical egoism, what is important or what matters is only consequences. But it demands that we consider consequences only insofar as they affect our own individual benefits and utilities. So this is the meaning of egoism. Egoism means, in all moral consideration, you just take in account the consequences or results of action that affect yourself, not affect other person, or not give benefit to other persons. So this is egoism. It's very different from altruism. So but utilitarianism is a sort of altruistic idea, because it is against egoism. It takes all human being impartially. It gives to each one of the persons. It is not important. It is myself or another. All have only one sharing or one part in the consideration or calculation of the consequences. So this is the important feature of utilitarianism. They say that utilitarianism has a slogan of impartiality, because according to utilitarianism, everyone is only one. For example, it is not, according to some ethical theory, my mother has a special relation to me, and I must regard him or must give benefit to her, must regard her or must give the benefit to her more than to another person, because this is a good relation and a special relation. But according to utilitarianism, all persons are the same, and each one has only one amount of, sharing in this calculation. So utilitarianism demands that we consider the impact of the consequences on everyone affected by the matter under consideration. The morally right action, according to utilitarianism, the one we ought to perform. There is a equivalence between right action and obligation, because right action means that one ought to perform, is this one that produces the greatest overall positive consequences for everyone. So this is the definition of utilitarianism. Utilitarianism means maximizing the benefits for the most for the people. It is better to be for more people, and number matters. This is one of the slogans for utilitarianism. They say that number matters. It is important to give benefit. It is important to have consequences of an action benefit 3%. It is better, or this is my obligation to do, rather benefit 2%. So matter is very important. Number is very important in calculating the result. So the result is maximizing the amount of pleasure, for example, for the extended or large or huge of the people. So this is the meaning of utilitarianism. Some of the utilitarian moral philosophers take into account the consequences for future generations as well as the present ones. This is one of the modern interpretation of utilitarianism. So they say that, for example, in the case of water, we must keep water for also the new generation because it has the same sharing of water as we have. So they have the same standing point in morality. So we must consider their benefits also. This is one of the new interpretation of new versions of utilitarianism. Some of the utilitarian moral philosophers take into account the consequences for future generation as well as the present ones. So this is important issue. Some of them take into account the consequences for all sentient beings, animals as well as human beings, the natural environment as well as our constructed world, or just the human population. So this is the one important issue about consequentialism is answering this question, as I talked, whom these are consequences for. But the second is about what is the utility, because we are talking about the utility, maximizing utility. What is the utility? So utilitarianism says consequences matter. Consequences utility. So it is maximizing the utility for most of the people, for the large amount or population, for example, affected by my work. So, but what is the utility? So this is the second question, an important question. The main answer, and the original of the history of utilitarianism, we call classical utilitarianism, take only pleasure as utility. So the only thing that, according to them, has intrinsic value is pleasure or avoiding pain. When I'm talking about pleasure, also I'm talking about avoiding pain. So because of the easiness, I just refer to pleasure, but we can say that the only thing that has intrinsic value is pleasure and avoiding pain. So according to classical utilitarianism, by classical utilitarianism, I mean the founders of utilitarianism, the idea of the founders of utilitarianism, Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill, as I refer to some of them. The only thing that has intrinsic value is pleasure, according to them. So according to classical utilitarianism, the right action is what produces more pleasure for a greater number of the affected people. Pleasure. So we call this hedonistic utilitarianism or classical utilitarianism. Hedon means pleasure. Hedonistic utilitarianism or classical utilitarianism. So Jeremy Bentham, one of the founders of utilitarianism, takes into account only commensurable pleasures that can be calculated, because we have two sorts of pleasures as a human being. Some of our pleasures come from bodily pleasures, eating, drinking, and like other things, for example, lust and anger and other, satisfying our desires. But some of the pleasures we gain don't come from bodily satisfaction of desires, such as actualizing of justice, realizing of justice. It is also a pleasant thing for us, maybe more than eating or having or grasping knowledge is more than eating. It is pleasing for us or pleasant for some of people. So there are two sorts of lazzat according to Islamic literature. Avicenna, in his famous book Isharat, has a chapter about the lazzat al-aqliyah. Lazzat means pleasures which related to realm of reason, not related to realm of body. Lazzat al-hissiyah and lazzat al-aqliyah. He is talking about these two forms of pleasures, and so prefer the pleasures of reason and talk about the importance of pleasures of reason. So here also we have this problem. Jeremy Bentham, one of the founders of utilitarianism, take into account only commensurable pleasures. Commensurable means quantitative pleasure. We can commensurate this pleasure with that and say that this is are two equal of that. So we can calculate them and say that in sum or in general we reach to 10 hedon. He also has the number thing. We enumerate one hedon means or two hedon, for example. So this is the idea of Jeremy Bentham. They are the pleasures we have from eating, drinking, and bodily pleasures or sensual pleasures. But there is a common charge that utilitarianism is, from the beginning of utilitarianism, some philosophers charged them as a philosophy for pigs. They say that the philosophy or ethics Jeremy Bentham is, discovered and defended can be said that it is a philosophy for pigs, because with quantitative pleasures or commensurable pleasures or bodily pleasures or sensual pleasures, we have no difference between. There is no difference between a human being and a pig. So we can say that this is a philosophy for pigs. After that, John Stuart Mill came, and he tried to answer this charge and to discharge this accusation. So he said that no, we accept hedonism. We accept that utility is always pleasure, but not as Jeremy Bentham says, not limit to only bodily pleasures. We take in account other pleasures, like pleasure of actualizing justice, realizing virtues, or these are pleasant things for us, but not commensurable with other pleasures, because I cannot say that pleasure of justice is too equal, for example, pleasure of drinking. It is not possible, because these have another essence, or the substance, and we cannot have a calculate for all of these things. So this is the idea of meal. So meal also is a hedonistic classical utilitarian, but it give more content to the meaning of pleasure, applications of pleasure. So because he tries to discharge the accusation of philosophy for pigs, this is the working, or this is the trying to keep avoid of this objection. And John Stuart Mill proclaimed that it is better to be a dissatisfied human, this is very famous, than a satisfied pig, because of the superior quality of human experience. So according to John Stuart Mill, if you suppose that there is a pig, for example, satisfied all of its desires are satisfied. This is on this side. But there is a human being. Some of his desires are not satisfied and also have pain. But according to John Stuart Mill, it is better to be unsatisfied human being, because being or having a character or essence of humanity, it is important. It is very important than being a pig, but all desires are satisfied. This is a famous point of John Stuart Mill. So John Stuart Mill introduced the distinction between quality and quantity of pleasures in order to fend off discharge. According to him, some pleasures we gain from knowledge or justice are incommensurable with bodily pleasures. But many of the utilitarian, but this is the modification or correctness of John Stuart Mill against Jeremy Bentham, founder of utilitarianism. But many of utilitarian scholars didn't accept and don't accept the modification or correcting of John Stuart Mill, because they say that this is against the nature of utilitarianism, because utilitarianism means calculating, maximizing the pleasure. So if you introduce pleasure of justice or pleasure of helping other or pleasure of knowledge or other things, it is not possible to calculate, because they are not quantitative character. So it is against the nature of utilitarianism, according to some critics of John Stuart Mill. This is one point. And the second point is that this modification makes utilitarianism more sophisticated, and because one of the benefits or one of the features the defenders or the proponents of utilitarianism usually refer is easiness or scientific character of utilitarianism, because they say that in the case of utilitarianism, we only have a scientific method to calculate the results to consequences. But for example, in the case of Aristotle ethics, we only have some ambiguations or ambiguity intuitions and knowledge, and there is no scientific method to calculate what is right and what is wrong. But according to utilitarianism, we have scientific method. We can have a calculator. There is a famous calculator of Bentham he invented to calculate that this result is, for example, 10 hedon, and it is better or it is obligatory to do than rather other alternative possibilities. So this is against this idea. But many of the utilitarian moralists consider means modification without justification in the frame of hedonism. They say that hedonism means paying the same standing or same weight to all pleasures, because pleasures of sense or pleasures of drinking are also pleasures. So why you prefer pleasure of knowledge to the pleasure of eating? Because according to hedonism, yes, according to some assumptions like the superiority of human being, this is out of utilitarianism, because utilitarianism only pay attention to the consequences, and the consequences or pleasures we find from doing something. So this idea is not accepted by many of utilitarian scholars. So the other issue, the third issue, is that we have, when we decide to do something, for example, in the case of this situation, I am engaged in the situation and I need to decide, for example, to lie or to tell truth. So if I consider only this special action and concrete action, and I arrange the calculation concentrated on this action. So I say that if I do in this case, if I tell truth or if I lie case, what is the consequences? This is called act utilitarianism, because I concentrate on the special action. But in some cases, or some utilitarians didn't accept this utilitarianism, because they say that it is difficult for each person to calculate in every case that I want to tell truth, I must have a calculator, and so take every result that may come from my action. And so it is no time to do this, and it is not good idea, because it is not possible for many of people when they decide to do something, at first they calculate. So this is actually utilitarianism, but this is the main, essence of consequentialism, as I refer to maybe at the end of this lecture. So this is one form of utilitarianism. And the second form of utilitarianism, called rule utilitarianism. In this case, I not concentrate on this action. I, instead of concentration or focusing on this lying, I focus on the law in general, lying in general, not in this case, as a rule. And I say that I must consider, or I must calculate the consequences of lying as a rule, not my lying in this case. So there is an important difference between act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. So in the case of rule utilitarianism, it is not so difficult, because we one time and in one case calculate and reach at a result that, for example, lying is not good rule, because bring more pains and more harms, rather more benefits or utilities or pleasure. But telling truth is better, because, or it is obligatory rule, because it brings more pleasure for more people. So this is just one calculation, not need to do in any case to have a calculation. So this is called rule utilitarianism. So I say that active utilitarianism believe that whenever we are deciding what to do, we should perform the action that will create the great net utility. In their view, the principle of utility, do whatever will produce the best overall results, should be applied on a case-by-case basis. the right action in any situation is the one that yields more utility, creates more well-being than other available actions. So this is the meaning of act utilitarian. I cited this two definitions from Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. There is a very good encyclopedia and is open in internet called Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. I checked most of the articles in this encyclopedia. I found it very accurate and very good articulation. So I usually refer or use this encyclopedia. The name is, if you type it in Google, Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy. Yes, also there is another encyclopedia is more philosophical or more sophisticated, is called Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. But I found Internet Encyclopedia of Philosophy more easily, and it is better for, you know, lecturing or lectures, and is maybe not in the top level of such as Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, but it is very good working in you know, database. So rule utilitarianism adopt a two-part view according to rule utilitarianism that stress the importance of moral rules. According to rule utilitarianism, at first, a specific action is morally justified if it is conforms to a justified moral rule. So if I want to decide to do, in this case, to lie or to tell truth, it is not necessary to calculate the results of this action. It is only necessary to know that lying is an application of the rule of lying. So because already I found and calculated that the ruling of lying is bad and is not obligatory, so in this case also I will say that this is not good without paying attention to the results of this action, because already it is calculated in the name of its rule. So the second is a moral rule is justified if its inclusion into our moral code would create more utility than other possible rules. So there are many points about utilitarianism, but I have no time to talk about utilitarianism. In one of the previous courses in my university, I talked maybe 10 lecture or whole of the time explaining utilitarianism, and there is a very good book, very, you know, text for teaching is a very good book. Julia Drive is the name of book, is Utilitarianism, and I found also this book very good, explaining utilitarianism and new movements or new versions of utilitarianism, because I'm talking about only the general ideas of utilitarianism, not about the, you know, new and modern versions of utilitarianism. Some of most famous or most important moral philosophers actually belong to this school and accepted this school, and so they use this also in case of medical ethics or engineering ethics, in applied ethics also. So this is very famous and very important school. So, but I'm not here to talk about its details, and so only it's general, and finish today, inshallah, my points about utilitarianism. But if you have question, and I gave my email last week, but I'm not sure that I didn't receive any question, and so if you need any more explanation, I'll come back to explain. And so, but this is the main idea, and I said about the references or books or the good articles about utilitarianism, you can see and you can read it. So one of the issues or argument against utilitarianism or deficiency of utilitarianism, alleged objections or deficiencies of utilitarianism, is that they say that the wrong answer objection. according to especially act utilitarianism, some people say that this objection is against act utilitarianism, but not. It can be, articulated to be against also rule utilitarianism, but we have no time to go to controversies about these details or, particular points. But this is wrong answer objection. This is the example or two examples which explain what is meant by this objection. Please pay attention to these examples. If a doctor can save 5 people from death by killing a healthy person and using that person's organs for life-saving transplants, then act utilitarianism, especially act utilitarianism, but we can also, say this objection against rule utilitarianism, but mainly is against act utilitarianism, implies that the doctor should kill the one person to save 5, because this is the meaning of maximizing pleasures or maximizing the benefit for the mass people, for the more people. So according to utilitarianism, if some person asks a utilitarian and consult him about what one doctor asked a utilitarian and say that in this case we have, for example, 5 person on the other side and they need organs, but we have one, for example, person here, I can kill actively or make something to be killed or to not continue his cure, and he will be killed. So give the organs of this person to 5 persons. So according to utilitarian idea, especially act utilitarianism, this is the way, but it is against our intuitive knowledge of morality, about our firm understanding of morality. This is what we have problem with utilitarianism. The second also is the same. If a person make a promise, but breaking the promise will allow that person to perform an action that creates just slightly more well-being than keep the promise will, then act utilitarianism implies that the promise should be broken. This is apparent according to them, because you promise, for example, not to return the money of this person, or excuse me, to return the money of this person, but you think that if you give it, for example, to this person, may have 10 hedon, but if keep it and give to other, for example, 10 people or 100 people, so it maximize the benefit more than the previous option. So according to them, you must break your promise. So the wrong answer, this is the accusation of wrong answer objection, is apparent against especially act utilitarianism, but it can be articulated against also rule utilitarianism with some modification. The second objection is too demanding objection. Too demanding objection means that, one of the idea of, as I referred and as I said, slogans or merits or benefits or importance features of utilitarianism is named or called impartiality, because according to utilitarian scholars, as I told, your mother has only one sharing, and the strange people you don't know them in Africa or in other country also has one sharing point. So if you want to do something, you must consider each one as equal and say that, for example, if I do this action, my mother, for example, affected 5 hedon and the other person is strange, I don't know him, also he will be affected 5, and so which one is better according, or excuse me, 6, for example, or 10. My mother has 5 hedon or pleasure as a result of my working and my action, but the stranger has maybe 10, or stranger has 20, for example. Which one is better, or which one is obligatory according to utilitarianism? The second, because this is maximizing the benefits, maximizing the pleasure. But this also is against our intuitive knowledge, because according to our intuition, morality doesn't demand this hard, thing from us. Because according to utilitarianism, I must give money or do this thing in favor of a stranger, and I must neglect or must, take away my mother from consideration, because it is not maximizing the benefit. So this is very, special problem, because the slogan is good. Yes, impartiality. Yes, this is impartiality, but it is not this. It is not accepted that impartiality in all cases is good, because in some cases you have, some established duties, and it is considerate, because your mother, you have some special duty your mother. This is a very good discussion. Is the name is special duties. I had a lecture, unfortunately not in English, about special issues in Islam, and I talked about special issues from Nahj al-Balagha of Imam Ali. This night is the birthday of Imam Ali. Congratulations. And so this is the point I found from Nahj al-Balagha of Imam Ali as a special duties. So we have the special duties, because I have a special duty to poor people, and it is important for me at first give money to these poor people, to this poor person. Also giving it to another person, or maybe 10 another person, maximize the pleasure. But because they already had pleasures, it is important for me to give money to this person. So this is the idea of impartiality. Yes, numbers matter, it is okay, but I have some in some cases special duty to my mother, duty to my poor neighbors, or duty to a person I already have a promise to him. I promise to do something for him. This is the cases of the special duties. So this utilitarianism is against the idea of a special duty, because he asked me to only do or work for maximizing the benefit or maximizing the pleasure. Yes, it is good. Maximizing for pleasure
Javadi, you are on mute. Javadi, you are on mute with yourself.
is it okay?
Yes, okay, that's fine. Yeah.
It's okay. Yes. Have you my voice and camera?
Yes.
Picture?
Yeah.
Yes. So this is called too demanding objection. Critics also attack utilitarianism, commitment to impartiality, and the equal consideration of interests. Almost everyone, however, believes that we have special moral duties to people who are near and dear to us, my mother or my father or my parents. This is not against morality to give some more consideration for my mother. It is according to Islamic idea, or according to the ontological, for example, of Kant, or maybe some of other like virtue ethics, sometimes it asks us to give more attention to some person. It is not against morality, but utilitarians say that it is against morality. They say morality only related to number. Number matters, but justice also justice also matters. This is the problem. Number matter, yes. It is good to give, for example, ice cream to 10 person, and to buy for example, $10, $100, 10 ice cream to give to 10 person, give them more pleasure, and so they benefit, or they have pleasure of eating 10 ice cream. But sometimes it is better to give 100 to one person because he is poor. He has no thing to use for eating, for drinking. So this is justice. Justice is more important than number. This is the point we have problem with utilitarianism. As a result, most people reject the notion that morality requires us to treat people we love and care about no differently from people who are perfect strangers as absurd. So, although I talked about justice, yes, this is another objection. Justice, yes, as I told, justice has a deontological merit. You know, justice is not a sort of consequences of the result. Justice is a deontological rule. It is always override all other considerations. So, yes, it is good for you to benefit, to make people more pleasant. Yes, good. But justice come and say, in this case, it is not good to maximize 10% person's utilities or benefits. It is good to maximize only 1% and maybe 10 head-on for this is better than 100 head-on to other people. This is the meaning of justice, because justice doesn't relate to consequences. You know, justice does not a consideration of consequences of number of people affected by pleasure or other things. Justice come to balance the utilities and distribution of the utilities. So justice cannot be defined in terms maximizing pleasure or expenses of most people. It sometimes demands us to do an action in favor of a poor person with a little pleasure rather than an alternative possible action that maximizes pleasure for more people. So to this point, I mean, to now, I gave some general consideration and explanation of the utilitarianism without going in depths, because I talked only of hedonistic utilitarianism as a classical utilitarian, but you know that there are some other versions, for example, called preferences theory, preferences utilitarianism. They are not talking about the pleasure. They say that utility is satisfying or securing your preferences. This is different from pleasure. So in some cases, for example, you prefer knowledge, you prefer healthy without having pleasure, sometimes with pain, but this is your preferences. So some utilitarianism has articulated utilitarianism, avoiding pleasure because hedonism is not a good idea. I will talk about it, inshallah, when I about Islamic ethics. Hedonism is not a standard. Hedon or pleasure cannot be a standard. Yes, pleasure is good, but not as a standard, not as a base or sources of all moral duties or moral virtues. So to just say something about Islamic view of utilitarianism, because utilitarianism is not so much proposed in Islamic literature, because it is a new and maybe modern idea of the West, and usually, unfortunately, we have no good debates of these new ideas of new morality in Islamic literature, in modern Islamic literature. We have some thing against or sometimes in defense of some, for example, Kantian ethics. One of the great scholars of Egypt, Abdullah Darraz, was defending Kantian ethics, and he wrote a book about the rules of morality in the Noble Quran, and I will talk about it, inshallah. An approach to Islamic morality, but it is not so much common in Islamic literature to discuss all of this. So utilitarianism, also, if you come to modern moral literature in Islamic teachings or in Islamic literature, found not much points, and it is difficult. We have with these ideas, but I try to say something about utilitarianism in Islamic view.
Agha Javadi, can you show your presentation? Agha Javadi, can you show your slide, please? Your slides are not visible. You know your slides.
Just give 1 minute to me.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You see the PowerPoint? Is it okay? Is it okay?
I think you started sharing screen, but still it's not coming.
Have you my voice?
If you change your slide, then might should be okay.
Not. Yeah, one slide is not seen.
No, still not. But it's showing that you have shared the slide. It's not coming. I don't know. So sure. Now we can see, yeah. Now we can see the slides.
You see?
Yeah, but
you see?
Yes,
yeah,
everything
okay.
fine. Thank you.
Okay. So, according to Islamic idea, as I understood, utilitarianism is not accepted as an ethical theory, answer to the source of morality, source of moral values. We cannot distinguish good and bad only by regarding the consequences of that action or that rule. This is the main point against utilitarianism, because according to Islamic idea, the principle of utility is important, but as a principle, not as a standard. Because we have many principles in Islam: principle of utility, principle of justice, principle of, for example, keeping promises. All are principles. So in some cases, maybe have some conflict. So we cannot give more worthy or more importance to principle of utility. So principle of utility has a same standing such as principle of, for example, knowledge or gaining knowledge or principle of help other people. Also, justice has overall weight on these principles. So I can say that principle of utility, maximizing the benefits or the pleasure for the mass or the large amount of people is very good idea. It's very good and is a duty for every Muslim, but it is not the only duty. It is not the source of other duties. We have also other duties. So in some cases, we need to override this principle for the sake of other important principles. So we can distinguish between principle and a standard. It is not accepted as a standard, but it's accepted as a principle. So this is the main idea in Islamic teachings. So this the case and rejection of classical utilitarianism as a moral theory or a standard, pleasure or even or preferences are not the indicator of moral worth. According to the Noble Quran, you know, sometimes you like something, you prefer something, but it is wrong. Sometimes you dislike something, but it's good. So like or dislike of you is not the indicator of right and right. So your desires are not the standard. Desires of human being, of each human being, is not the standard of goodness or badness. Sometimes he accords to good, sometimes he accords to bad. In some cases, for example, we have virtuous persons like Imam Ali, for example, or many Socrates, for example. His desires cultivated to give pleasure from doing good things, but not all of human beings are the same. So in many cases, desires are against morality, not in matter of morality. So this must be distinguished between must distinguish between standard and principle. We accept as a principle, as a guiding principle for moral life. It is good to benefit, to please people, more people. This is good idea, but not the only thing, only source for moral worth. This is very bad idea. So we accept account, we accept number matters, we accept consequences matters, but not as the solely and mere criteria. This is the point. Accepting pleasure or satisfying the preferences as a moral principle among other principles. I'll give some textual evidences, just 5 minutes and finish this lecture and give time to question. Textual evidences for the claim, for my claim. My claim is that rejecting pleasure or consequences as the standard for moral worthy or moral value and basis for distinguishing good and bad action or right and wrong action. This is not true, but accepting it as a principle, as a guiding principle for moral life. Some textual evidences for the claim. These are the narrations. I didn't refer to the sources, but if you want, I can find it. And so these all are the narrations of imams. Whoever satisfies the needs of his brother is like serving God for a lifetime. This is the very good narration that man qaza haja li akhihi fakannama khadama Allah umrahu. What we want from our life, it is to serve God for a lifetime. But God say, according to this narration, whoever satisfies the needs of his brother. Needs of his brother means giving pleasure, bringing pleasure, bringing satisfaction of his desires and needs. The second, make your brother happy so that God will make you happy. These are very good principles. Yeah, rejection of consequentialism or rejection of utilitarianism doesn't mean rejection of the principle of utility. This is very bad mistake, bad misunderstanding, misunderstanding, very bad misunderstanding, because many of people say that consequences doesn't matter. Why? Consequences matter, but not only consequences matter. So this is narration. Make your brother happy so that God will make you happy. Surra akhaka yasurruka Allah, from Imam Sadiq. yeah, the third is very important. أحب الناس إلى الله أنفعهم للناس. It means that the most beloved people in the view of Allah are those who benefit the people the most, maximizing the benefit, maximizing the utility, or who benefit the people the most. So this is very good idea. We need to have this idea in our societies. Unfortunately, some of Muslim societies only concentrate on some duties rather than paying attention to the consequences. They think that consequences doesn't matter because we reject utilitarianism, but they didn't differ between this rejecting the consequentialism or utilitarianism as a theory, moral theory, or as a principle we accept as a principle. So the most believed people in the view of Allah are those who benefit the people the most. But this is against the utilitarianism but being enjoyed or happy or making the others happy by sinning is not accepted according to this narration. Do not be happy via doing sin, because it is more worse than sinning itself. A very, very good idea. Yes, you have not right, or you have no option to please people by stealing, for example, than giving money to other person, because this is bad thing, this is sin, this is bad action. And this is very bad idea to use some sin for pleasing yourself or other people. Pleasing other people or benefiting other people is very important, but not in the cost of stealing, not in the cost of sinning. This is the meaning of rejection of utilitarianism as a theory, as a basic theory, not. And there are some other things that I just finish my lecture here, and thank you for your attention. Service if you have a question. Thank you very much. So there are some points in here. For the maximum pleasure for most people and minimum pain. Yes, this is okay. This is the definition of utilitarianism. Maximum pleasure for most people. Two things operate in our calculation: maximum pleasure and most people. So this is the good idea of utilitarianism. And the second is, can utilitarianism have a utilitarianism have a similar objective to pragmatism? Can utilitarianism have a similar objective to pragmatism? Yes, yes, similar objective is against pragmatism, because pragmatism, pragmatism has two meanings. Sometimes pragmatism as a only source and as the same as a standard we reject, but pragmatism as an approach or as a principle is very good, not being in a idealistic atmosphere. Depends on how you would define desire. Thank you. Yes, this is a very important point, because this is a good idea. We have Joseph Butler, one of the bishops of England, maybe 200 years ago. I'm not sure about the history. He has a ceremony distinguishing between two sorts of desires. First order desires, like desire, for example, desire to drink. This is one form of desires. But the second desire is about these desires to arrange the first order desires in a good, for example, arrangement. This is also desire, but this desire is not the same as desire of the first order. So he distinguished between altruistic desires and egoistic desires. Egoistic desires all are in first order desires, but in the second, when we consider our desires over first order desires and prefer these to that, and or lead one of them to do in favor of other person, this is a sort of desire. All actions of human being, altruistic or egoistic, according to most of the philosophers, come from desires. Because if we know desire, no work, there is no work. But some of desires come out of our thinking, our believing, our knowing, but some of them come only from our nature, our insects, and this is the difference between desires. If one desire is to advocate for justice, yes, desire for advocate to justice is not the same as bodily desires, freedom and human dignity. As I told you, that in itself can be a standard, yes, but this is not as a desire to justice or for or freedom is like what we saw in Aristotelian ethics, because there is this is very good important point. I just need to explain it. There is a confusion about the meaning of desires or nature of humanity. You see that you saw that in case of Aristotle, he referred to nature of humanity. Ergon argument is considering the nature of humanity. But the nature of humanity in Aristotle is the essence of humanity, is different from the nature or naturalism of Humean conception, David Hume conception, or modern moral philosophy. When they are talking about human nature after Hume, they are talking about actual human bodily desires or actual desires. It is different from the desires Aristotle is talking. Aristotle also is talking about desire. At the first sentence of Nicomachean Ethics, he says that all people desires happiness, eudaimonia. But this desire is different from desire David Hume talking. David Hume is talking about desires, mean actual desires you have, or experimental desires you have. But then Aristotle talking about desires, it means that nature of humanity, essence of humanity is aiming at by essence, aiming at, not desiring some actual desire. This is if you consider desire to justice as a standard, yeah, I agree with you, but it is not utilitarianism. So this is the problem. Mill argues that not only is utility not a good godless doctrine, but in fact he says that God is because he desires above all happiness of his creatures. Yes, a utilitarian believes in goodness. Yes, as I told, we also accept that God think about human utilities, human pleasures, but not only pleasures. This is an important issue. As I told, I don't reject importance of utility, importance of pleasure. Yes, in these days, we have a dua, we have a prayer after salat. We say that يومن أرجوه لكل خير فآمن صحته عند كل شر يومن يؤتي الكثير بالقليل ومن يؤتي من سأله ومن لم يسأله تحننا منه. Means that God love us, means that God give us what we need, what we ask, or even we don't ask what we need. So this is the good idea, but it is not the only good thing. This is the importance. God also asks us, for example, in some cases, to leave our benefits in favor of other people's benefits, or to give to leave the pleasure, life of pleasure in favor of life of jihad, or in favor of life of struggle with our hearts, to purify our hearts. This is the idea. Yes, These two, how do we define pleasure? I think this is the last question. That one is something like a naturalistic religion. How do we define pleasure? There is two famous definition of pleasure, which both can be found in Nicomachean Ethics, because at first he defined pleasure as a negative thing, as avoiding pain, and the second define pleasure as positive, having something, having emotion of satisfying our needs. The pleasure is not, is a subordinate thing, because if you have no need, if you have no need, so you have no pleasure, because pleasure comes from your satisfying your need. If you need eating, so by eating you find pleasure. Drinking, if you're not interested in drinking, so you have not interested in pleasure of drinking in this time. So pleasure have two meanings. One is negative, is a sort of not having pain. This is not a good definition by pleasure, but in some positive definition, which we see in Aristotle, or also in Isharat of Ibn Sina, in one chapter about the definition of lazza or pleasure, is come from satisfying our desires, our interests, our needs. So if we no desire, if we have no desire, no needs, so we will have no pleasure. Pleasure is subordinate thing. For this reason, also Aristotle rejects the hedonism, because he said that this is a sort of consequentials of some original thing. Originally, we have need, and we try to satisfy this need. But by satisfying this need, we find pleasure. Pleasure is not our end or our purpose at first. Our purpose is just satisfying, finding our needs, securing our needs. But by securing, by attaining our needs, we can find pleasure. This is the idea Aristotle rejects, rejection of hedonism in Aristotle. I think it is a good point. But I can say that we have two definitions of pleasure. One is negative, and the second is positive. But positive is better. Pleasure is subjective. Pleasure for me, yes, okay. Pleasure is subjective. It differs from person to person. Some person have pleasure of this because he desires this, but your desire is different, so your pleasure is different. So pleasure is subjective. One of the definitions we reject hedonism as a standard for moral value is this: pleasure is subjective. But some people say that because all human beings has the same essence, this is the point of Aristotle, they have some common pleasures, they have some common desires. So it is called fitra. It can be taken as a standard for moral value. It can be taken, but not pleasures differ from a person to person. This is subjective. That pleasure also is subjective, but subject to the essence of humanity, not to the personality of humanity. There is a difference. Pleasure is subject. Pleasure for me could be striving. Yes, it doesn't necessitate materialistic or worldly desires. This, as I told, these kinds of pleasure is very good. You see in Avicenna define eudaimonia or happiness as pleasure, but like this pleasure to attain God, to be near to God. This kind of pleasure is not utilitarianism, because utilitarianism says that we enumerate or we calculate the desires or pleasure, or they are talking about the quantitative or bodily pleasures. If they are talking about pleasures like pleasure to help other people or pleasure to become near to God, they are accepted. These forms of utilitarianism may be accepted, but have their problems, but not as the same like Bentham or Mill, even Mill utilitarianism, because Mill also didn't talk about God or, loving God or other things. So this is the point. If you have no question, we finish. Next week, inshallah, we're talking about deontology. At first, deontology of Kantian deontology. The second, maybe 2 lectures, we need to explain Kant's idea of autonomy, autonomous morality, and then come to the divine command ethics or religious deontology. And by this, we finish the discussion of ethical theory, come to the discussion of meta-ethical issues like moral reality, moral realism, and moral epistemology or moral motivation, and try to give some explanation of the most important issues of meta-ethics. Thank you, and if you have no question, I just exit. It seems that you have not my voice.
No, we can hear you.
Answer of you.
Yeah, we can hear. If there's no question, then we.
There is another question, I think. No?
Okay, yeah, sure.
Thank you. No, thank you. Okay, thank you. So, Shab Bekhair in Farsi.
Okay, Shab. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Many congratulations on the birthday of Imam Islam to yourself and everybody.
Yes, Allah, I congratulate. Inshallah.
Thank you.
Okay.